Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend to all of you my warmest welcome to Japan-U.S. Business and Technology Symposium 2014. My name is Toshiro Okada, Chief Executive Director of JETRO, Japan External Trade Organization, San Francisco office, and today's MC. This afternoon, we explore all the prospective wider and deeper collaboration and the interaction between Japanese business entities and community and counterparts, especially business ecosystem in the United States, California, San Francisco Bay Area, or Silicon Valley. We have 3 one-hour sessions during this afternoon. The first part, keynote speech, Open Innovation Best Practice by Dr. Stephen Hoover, CEO of PARC, a Xerox company, following the government of Japan and JETRO representative. The second part, breakout sessions on 3 intriguing industrial spaces, information technology in this room, energy and the environment in the room SATA 1 and 2, healthcare medical device in the room SATA 3. The third part, roundtable, demystifying Japan, taking place in this room again. Today, I'm very happy to welcome so many speakers and session coordinators from various industries. They represent successful organizations who have experience in Japan-U.S. business relations and can share perspectives on business opportunities with you. I would also like to note that this symposium is supported by various business, economic, and diplomatic entities. Now let's start the first session. We have 3 speakers today, and we'll take questions at the end of the whole session. First, I would like to welcome Mr. Tsuneyuki Kato, Executive Vice President of JETRO, who is recognized as a key player for expansion of foreign direct investment into Japan. He will speak about how to further develop business between our 2 countries. So please welcome Mr. Kato.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tsuneyuki Kato, Executive Vice President of JETRO. It is with great pleasure to host this symposium, welcoming these great speakers and enthusiastic professionals from a variety of industries. I would also like to extend my sincere appreciation to the many related people for their great support in organizing this seminar. It was right here in San Francisco that the USS Powhatan and the Japanese ship Kanrinmal docked after crossing the Pacific to sign the Treaty of Amity and Commerce between our countries in 1860, 150 years ago. In 1954, exactly 60 years ago, JETRO also established an office right here. Built on a friendly relationship, which have spanned over the long period of time, today, as developed countries sharing common values for market economy and democracy, the US and Japan are important partners for one another. I assume that products of Japanese companies, such as automobile and appliances, are prevalent in your daily lives. Recently, we also have been exporting Japanese food and baseball players. Conversely, American products and services are fundamental to our daily lives in Japan. Especially this smartphone is the American product we especially cannot bear to part from. It is unfortunate that while a large portion of smartphone components are made in Japan, we never see a cherry blossom mark along with the apple mark. Other popular exports from America include Hollywood movies and Napa Valley wine. All of this has helped lead to the U.S. becoming the first export designation for Japan, while Japan is the fourth for the U.S. Japanese companies in your country employ 619,000 people. American companies employ 320,000 people in Japan. We are holding today's symposium aiming at deepening the partnership between the U.S. and Japan. We at JETRO conduct various activities to support such partnership between America and Japanese companies. One example is the Silicon Valley Innovation Program, which assists Japanese venture companies within the ecosystem of Silicon Valley. Currently, 10 Japanese companies are developing their operations by building business models, exploring customers and business partners, and finding funds under the guidance of JETRO. JETRO offers support services for overseas companies considering direct investment into Japan to establish their companies in Japan. For example, JETRO offers them free office spaces at 6 locations up to 50 business days in Japan for business incubation. We also introduce experts in the field of law and accounting to them. When overseas companies face any problem in expanding to Japan, we reach out to the Japanese government for improvement. If you are interested in any topics in today's symposium, please contact our office in San Francisco. Talk to JETRO first. This is our message today. We are looking forward to helping your company. Over the past 3 years, our San Francisco office has assisted 32 cases of investment into Japan. We look forward to helping your company next. Of course, investment in Japan is not a simple matter to succeed in. The standards of Japanese consumers are high, as you probably know. Now, please recall the story of 2 shoe salesmen who went to a foreign country to survey their market. As you may know, they went to a country where no one wears shoes. After seeing the situation, one salesman thought to himself, "This is useless. There is no market for shoes here." On the other hand, the other salesman called the headquarters and shouted, "This is brilliant. Ship 1 million pairs here immediately." As you can probably guess, my point is that while the level of FDI into Japan is currently low, there lies the opportunity for significant growth in the future. Well, the Japanese wear shoes when outdoors, but don't wear them inside our houses, though we may wear slippers inside. If you are a salesman or a saleswoman, how would you evaluate the Japanese market? Is there any business opportunity in selling shoes or not? Would it be better to sell slippers instead of shoes? Please put the challenging spirit of U.S. companies to use in the Japanese market. Lastly, I'd like to extend again my sincere gratitude to the speakers and panelists for kindly taking part in this symposium. I will conclude my opening remarks by hoping this event will help further develop business between our 2 countries. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kato. And today, representing the government of Japan is Mr. Hidehiro Yokoo, Director General, Trade and Economic Cooperation Bureau of Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, who plays an important role in the policy of promoting inward direct investment, introduces investment environment in Japan, and incentive programs for foreign enterprises, touching upon Abenomics. So please welcome Mr. Yokoo.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to have the opportunity to speak about how Japan is providing new chances for your business today. My presentation consists of 3 parts. The first is Abenomics and changing Japanese economy. The second is Japan's strength as an investment destination. And the third is the government support programs for setting up your business in Japan. I will start with the 3 arrows of Abenomics. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who took power December 2012, has taken a decisive economic strategy called Abenomics. This is consisting of 3 pillars or arrows: bold monetary policy, flexible fiscal policy, and growth strategy to encourage private investment. Abenomics started from changing people's negative mindset, which had been fixed by prolonged deflation and economic stagnation, by implementing the first 2 arrows. As shown in the diagrams, this has resulted in a dramatic upturn in Japan's economic performance. The real GDP growth rate has shifted from negative to positive. Other indicators, such as employment, have been improved. Now, business sentiment and consumer confidence have become very positive. In addition to the first 2 arrows, the third arrow, aiming at structural reform of the economy, is necessary to truly revitalize the Japanese economy. This is the key to secure the sustainable economic growth. Prime Minister Abe is strongly committed to the regulatory reform. He has mentioned that he is willing to act like a drill bit, strong enough to break through the solid rock of vested interests. Major sectors include healthcare, agriculture, electricity. The Pharmaceutical Affairs Law was amended by accelerate examination of innovative medical devices. The long-lasting rice production adjustment system will be abolished, and private companies will be able to engage in farming without barriers. Japan's electricity market will be liberalized, with power generation splits off from power transmission. In designated areas, further experimental regulatory reform will be conducted under the National Strategy Special Zones Law from this spring. The Japanese government is also implementing cross-sectoral regulation system reforms. These include more flexible labor market, enhancing corporate governance, requiring private companies to appoint external directors, and business-friendly tax system. We have already decided to introduce tax incentives on investment, and will set about further reforms on corporate tax. In addition, we have started a unique initiative in providing preferential regulatory flexibility to individual front-runner enterprises qualified under the Industrial Competitiveness Enhancement Act, which came in effect just last month. Japan is actively pursuing economic partnership agreements, or EPA, such as TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Because Japan is engaged in mega FTA, or EPA, negotiations, including not only TPP, but also RCEP, RCEP, including 16 East nations, East Asian countries, and Japan-EU EPA, Japan is in a position to play a pivotal role as a bridging partner and a gateway to each other. Finally, the role of women. The female force in Japan is the most underutilized resources. Prime Minister Abe particularly stresses the importance to promote the advancement of women in the workforce. Then I'd like to show some Japan's strengths which make the investment environment in Japan attractive. The first point is large and sophisticated market. GDP of Japan of $6 trillion makes it the world's third largest market. In addition, consumers in Japan are matured and demanding. According to some foreign companies operating in Japan, answering consumer needs is to be in the laboratory for other potential markets. The second point is capability for innovation. Japan is optimized for innovation and provides an ideal environment for R&D. The diagrams show that Japan's R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP is 3.7% and is the highest among G8 countries. And Japan's share of international patent filings by country of origin is 22%, the second in the world. Many foreign companies have identified Japan as an innovation hub for the rest of the world. Moreover, not only large enterprises, but also medium and small enterprises, or SMEs, have high levels of technology. You can find good partners in Japan. The third point is well-developed infrastructure, such as the transportation system and information and telecommunication networks, as shown in the diagram. I'd like to stress Japan's safe and comfortable living environment. According to the Global Peace Index, which is the indicator of the level of safety and security in society, as well as the extent of militarization and international conflict, Japan is ranked the 6th in the world and number 1 in Asia. We are also proud of food in Japan. Traditional Japanese cuisine, or washoku, was selected as intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO last year. You can enjoy not only Japanese foods like sushi and tempura, but also excellent dishes from all over the world. The fact that Japan has so many restaurants recommended by Michelin tells much about its rich and varied diet culture. Besides, Japan has beautiful four seasons and traditional culture. This is distinct. We do hope that everyone experiences Japan's attractive and wonderful life. Now I'd like to introduce the government support programs for foreign companies to set up businesses in Japan. The Japanese government supports global enterprises in establishing high value-added sites, either R&D facilities or regional headquarters. This slide shows a subsidy program offered by my ministry, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. So far, we selected 23 global companies for this subsidy program from 2010 to 2013. 4 US companies, GE, Johnson & Johnson, Tenneco, and Converge, were selected in the past 2 years. This kind of incentive programs are also provided by local governments. We also provide preferential treatment to global enterprises qualified under the Act for Promotion of Japan as an Asian Business Center. This includes corporate tax breaks, approximately from 36% to 29% for helping cost reduction, shortening of visa issuing procedures from 30 days to 10 days, and shortening of patent examination period, also from 16 months to just 2 months. Most reliable supporter for foreign investors is JETRO, as Mr. Kato mentioned. In addition to the various services of JETRO, JETRO started the new support framework called Invest Japan Hotline last September. JETRO receives questions on administrative procedures and requests for regulatory reforms from those who are setting up business in Japan. It arranges meetings with officials of regulatory agencies if needed. It also relays requests for regulatory reforms to the government. From this April, we prepared a special budget for JETRO. JETRO will hire industrial specialists and provided customized business plans to those who are interested in investing in Japan. We hope that foreign companies take advantage of these support programs. Let me conclude my presentation. Prime Minister Abe said, "Buy my Abenomics," last September in New York. And Japan's economic landscape will change dramatically, he said last month in Davos, Switzerland. Your companies are most welcome to Japan, and I do hope you not to miss these great opportunities for your company's success. Invest in Japan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yokoo. Now, I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Stephen Hoover, CEO of PARC, a Xerox company. Dr. Hoover is PARC, which develops innovations and new technologies and takes those to market in collaboration with Fortune 500 or Global 1,000 companies, startups, and governments in diverse areas, including networking, electronics, clean tech, and intelligent systems. Dr. Hoover specializes in integrating technology, market, and business opportunities from fundamental research and development to commercial scale-up with experiences such as intelligent self-healing products, computational photography solutions, and new web services platforms. In terms of the relationship with Japan, Dr. Hoover has reinvigorated the activity of PARC there, including the opening of Tokyo office last May. So everybody, please welcome Dr. Hoover.
Thank you for the kind welcome. Good afternoon and konbanwa. I'm pleased to have the chance to speak to you today. And when we were asked to talk, we thought it would be useful to talk about really 3 things. Some of our observations about innovation and how to create an innovative environment and how to be innovative. A little bit about our experience in opening the office in Japan and some words of advice to those of you who might be considering that. And third, people always are interested in knowing what we're working on at PARC. So we'll spend a little bit on some of those areas. But let me start with a little bit of a background. Hopefully most of you in the room have heard of PARC because of our fundamental contributions to personal computing and networking. Started in 1970 as a research lab at Xerox focused on creating the office of the future. Created at PARC was the invention of laser printing, the first personal workstation computer, Ethernet, which was spun out through 3Com. What you see is what you get editing, which we all take for granted today, but as someone who first programmed a computer on a paper punch tape, it's a pretty significant change. And many other inventions. One of the things that has happened in the past decade at PARC in our journey and is highlighted by that orange bar on the bottom, where you see the color changes and the name PARC, a Xerox company. And what that represents is at that time, PARC went from being an internal captive R&D center to being a business in the open innovation business. And that change was brought about for a couple of reasons. One of which is that if you are a good research and innovation center, your job is to create opportunities beyond the core business of the current company. That's your job, is to create optionality, new ideas and new options, which could extend into new areas. And of course, many of those will get taken up by the parent company. If none of those get taken up, then you're not very good at your job. But frankly, if all of them get taken up, I would argue you're not good at your job. Because the reality is there are many reasons why those options may not make sense for the parent company to extend into the market. Lack of channel, lack of manufacturing value chain, other priorities simply, other strategic priorities at the time. But the company benefits from that optionality. And so the idea of us going into the business of innovation is to, in fact, create a new channel to take those options to market. And that's, in fact, what we have done over the past 10 years. We are still a wholly owned subsidiary of Xerox, but again, a business, a P&L. And today, more than half of our revenues come from external work that we do for a variety of clients, from fundamental research with the government to partnerships with small companies, Fortune 500, Global 1000 companies, to take those technologies to market. So from that venue in the business of breakthroughs, let me tell you a little about how we do that. One of the things that we try to do is identify areas where technology is going to change rapidly over the next decade, and where that technology is likely to be disruptive to business, both good and bad disruption, disrupting existing businesses and enabling new businesses. And then we create core IP in those areas, and then we're not in the product or service business, in the final offering for customers, find the right partner to take that to market, and to have a repeatable innovation process to drive those business results. And that's really what I want to talk to you a little bit today about. What are some of the core ideas about how to be innovative? And the first that really is at the heart of what PARC has been in its over 40 years of existence, and is even stronger today as we've moved into this open innovation model, being in the business of breakthroughs, is that truly transformative innovation almost always comes from the combination of three things. The technical expertise in the right corner. If you're a technology-driven innovation center, then that's the core, the base of the foundation of your organization. You must have world-class technical expertise. But it takes more than that. As Mr. Kato showed, opportunities come from understanding your customers and what are their problems. So really being able to understand people and what is the job they're trying to hire that technology for, and being able to translate that into successful products and successful innovations is important. And finally, oftentimes new innovations require new models for business. And so being facile and able to envision those new models and create those often is required by disruptive technologies. So that's the first. Behind that core idea, then, when we go out, and it turns out, as I said, we'll talk about this a little more, that because we have been successful in bringing innovations into the world, as we went into this open innovation business, it turned out that many customers not only wanted to work with us on a particular technology, but actually to help them become more innovative. And in fact, that's what led to our opening of a Japan office, is the demand to work with those customers to help them learn how to be more innovative. And so when we help people how to think about that, there are 6 core practices that we talk about. On the slide here are those. I'm only going to have time today to talk to you about 2, which are kind of the foundational elements. And, but we'll talk a little bit about, if people want to learn more and engage with us, how they do that. So let me go into these top 2 areas, which is user needs and technology driven, which I touched on slightly before, and a focus on agility. And as I said, and this is kind of one of the things that we learned very early in the personal workstation, is people in the end use technology. Even if it's a big data analytic, there's a business analyst who's trying to use that, or there's an end customer that you're trying to make a purchase recommendation to. And really understanding what is their problem at a deep and rich level is really important. And one of the reasons is, and it's very easy for us as technologists to really focus on solving the problem in the right way. If you're in a computer system, what stack to use? Am I going to do Ruby on Rails? Which web browser technology I'm going to use? Am I going to use Flash or Silverlight? And all of those things are important questions. But you can focus on, if you solve the problem in the right way, but you're fundamentally solving a problem which isn't going to drive users to do something different, then you haven't really moved the needle. So solving the right problem, making sure that you really do, again, understand those user needs is incredibly critical. But it's more than focus groups. Henry Ford is very famously quoted as being asked, saying, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. But of course, you don't ask your customers to do your job, which is to design the product. But what you really do is try to understand their needs. Henry Ford understood the trouble that people went to care for their horses, the unreliability, in fact, of horses as transport, the difficulty in scaling those. And so he understood that because he had lived that life himself, and he knew that need. So how do you understand those latent needs? Well, we as a technology center have actually built a competency. We hire computer scientists, electrical engineers, physicists, et cetera, but we also hire social scientists, people who understand people. And there is a science to this. Observational methods that start actually from ethnography. Margaret Mead very, very famously said, what people say and what they do and what they say they do are all different things. So again, this is the risk of asking your customers. We have a story that we tell ourselves about how we do our jobs. And if you ask us, we'll write a nice linear flow chart. And if somebody observes us in our job, we'll see it's a messy thing. And there are many workarounds and challenges that, in fact, we just take care of. Technology, if it can make those things easier, can really be highly sticky. So there are a set of tools that you can use here. Video observations, participation. When we do a new project, we always assemble a team of ethnographers or social scientists and technical folks and go and walk a mile in those customers' shoes and really understand what is the pain point, what is the problem, what is the job they're trying to do. There are a whole set of technologies in terms of user modeling. Obviously, social and web analytics today are great information sources to understand what people are doing and how they're doing it. And so I encourage all of you, if you're at the forefront of innovation and you're not out interacting with customers in some way, that you need to go and do that. And again, there are a set of ways and tools to do that. Let me move on a little bit to this idea of agility. And one of the key things to recognize about innovation is it is fundamentally a learning process. And what that means is, and it's fundamentally a learning process because innovation is always putting two things together, solving a problem that people haven't said they can solve before because they're mutually contradictory things. It's about exploring the unknown, like when you explore this maze. So when you explore this maze, no one would expect on the first try to get the whole way through to the end. So when I hit a dead end, have I failed or have I learned something? If you frame it as failure, then the people will not be incentive to solve that problem, to learn. So you have to have an approach to innovation that innovation is learning. And failure is acceptable. Otherwise, you will never take the risk necessary to create a new opportunity. Of course, you want to fail at a low cost. You want to fail, first of all, where the potential reward is worth it. The second is you want to fail at low cost. And the third is you want to learn from that failure. So learning cultures accept failure. Innovative cultures are learning. And a lot of times what it's about how fast you can get through that loop. You have an idea, a hypothesis. You build something to test it. That something could be a technology problem, a fixture in the lab, a piece of test equipment. The problem could be about customer understanding. And then it's how do I hack a prototype together to get in front of a set of customers to really see if it works. Or the pre-work, again, of going out and doing that observational work. How do I measure that experiment, right? I have a hypothesis. I'm going to measure some outcome. And then I'm going to do something as a result of that, of that experiment. I'm going to learn and change. And innovative cultures are people who learn how to get around that loop very quickly at low cost. I love this quote. Let's make better experiments tomorrow. And of course, let's be clear, mistakes aren't good, and failures of planning, if there's a predictable kind of failure, it's like designing an experiment as a scientist where you didn't control the conditions properly when you should have known you needed to control the temperature, et cetera. So mistakes aren't good if they're avoidable, but learning is good. Testing a hypothesis is good, and making that cycle. And again, there are repeatable innovation processes here. Again, when we go out, particularly with new IT or software services, it almost always starts with a field study, understanding the people, modeling that process, working collaborative design workshops, some type of prototype and pilot, and multiple iterations. And this is really what, today is, if you're not familiar with it, I would encourage you to become familiar with it, the lean startup approach in customer development that Eric Ries and Steve Blank have documented in their books, and there's classes out there. And again, I encourage you all to learn from that kind of approach because it is a key to being agile. And agile, as I said, is the key to learning, and learning is the key to innovation. So hopefully I've given you a couple insights into innovation. We do work with people. Again, we have built this as a services offering. We didn't really expect it as we went into this open innovation business, but because of demand, we have built that. We have events. If anyone here is interested, we have one coming up in March, and to learn a little bit more about this approach to innovation. So let me talk a little bit more about our presence in Japan, and it really came out of, we have been, since we've been in this open innovation business, we've been doing business in Japan for quite a while. And because Japanese companies are very innovative, as the executive director showed us, and it's a great market opportunity for us. But what we found was a couple of things. One, certainly as we go into this, as the demand has become higher for us, in this innovation services, helping people become more innovative, learning, teaching them new processes and practices, coaching them to embed them in their work process, that's a very high-touch interaction. And so doing that with one business trip every 6 weeks didn't really work very well. The other is, and I'll talk a little bit about this in the next slide, is Japan. For those of you who are interested in doing business in Japan, Japan is a culture of relationships and multiple interactions. You're going to find that you're going to have multiple, what would be in the U.S., you do 3 sales calls and then they decide to buy or they not. is not the way it works in Japan. You're going to spend a lot of time interacting with your Japanese partners to really build a fabric of trust and knowledge with each other. And so, again, that physical presence made a difference. Again, you can learn more from our website if you're interested in this, and these are some of the Japanese companies that we work with. And in terms of takeaways, this idea of relationship development, as I just talked about, is very important. The business transactions will follow only after trust has been established. And that takes time and effort, and it's different than what many of us may be used to in a Western culture. But what else the difference is those relationships last, and they are worth the time invested. And again, what we found was having people on the ground for repeated interaction was very important. And frankly, also that our presence of, we had some people working in Japan for us, but from home and different things, and we didn't have an office. We didn't have a place that was PARC in Japan. And again, that made a real difference because the Japanese customers then understand that you're committed. That's a sign of commitment to them and to that market and to serve those needs. And that really can't be undervalued in terms of their willingness to do business with you. Japanese customers want a long-term relationship. They want to know you're going to be there tomorrow. They want to know when they have a problem, you're going to help them and respond to them. And so that idea of presence and relationships really, really matters. There's a complex business ecosystem, a way companies work together, again, that until you're embedded in that mix is really hard to understand. And finally, one of the differences in Japan is it is a more risk-averse and failure-avoiding culture in general than what we find in Silicon Valley. And so, again, that importance of relationships to get through that. Are you going to be here tomorrow? Taking a small step that can be successful to build that relationship are very key things for you to think about as you think about doing business in Japan. Well, hopefully that helped you, give you a little insights from our experience in opening an office in Japan, which we've been very, very pleased with. As I said, one of the things people always are very interested in what are we working on? What are the ideas that we are focusing on for the future? And I talked about at the beginning, our model is to identify a few core areas and then invest in those areas for the future. And there are 5 focus areas for us at PARC right now. The democratization of energy, which is going to be an interesting panel topic this afternoon. Usable information, and big data, analytics, cloud computing are big buzzwords, but those are things. In the end, again, we're about the person in the loop. What's the job someone's trying to do? How do I make that information usable to them? That's usable information. Smart infrastructure. Clearly, the world is becoming connected, and I mean not all of us people, but the world, the physical world. Google cars that drive themselves, Nest thermostats online in our home. Our bodies are being monitored by instruments that we wear. So smart infrastructure is a key aspect. And, of course, those smart devices, the small, cheap sensing and actuation so that the world is connectable, the physical world is connectable. What I want to talk about, so anybody interested, happy to talk about those areas offline or come to our website and you can learn more or give us a call. What I want to talk about today is manufacturing. And I'm going to start in an interesting place, I think, for you. This is a quote from Mark Andreessen that I love, and it's about why software is eating the world. And I think it's a really important point is that, and really you got to look at this as computing and networking, not just software, right? It's Moore's law that enables this and the advances in networking and computing that has enabled. But when software comes into an industry, it does radically change it. And so let me talk a little bit about what happened. And this is where PARC in the 70s and 80s disrupted computing itself, mainframe and minis, with the creation of the personal workstation and the personal network, the LAN, through Ethernet. And of course, when this first happened, there were many, many people who said, why would everybody want a computer? And there are companies like DEC, Ken Olsen, who ran DEC, who led the mini computer industry, which really challenged the mainframe industry. And Ken Olsen is famously quoted as saying, why would everybody want a PC? And in fact, DEC was slow to the market to focus on that opportunity space and got into significant trouble. And of course, I think we're all now familiar with what's happened to the media market over the past decade and a half. This chart to me is just amazing because it shows how fast these transitions can occur when the time is right. And it shows the drop in newspaper advertising, including online advertising, by the way, dropping from 60 million as late as 2001, 2002, to just over 20 billion, in 2012. 3x in a decade. And that's, of course, because media changed. And at the time, many people fought that change. They said, well, I don't want to listen to some blogger's opinion about things. I'm interested in the people who run the New York Times say people are interested in the 10 or 20 people who are the experts and hearing their opinions. And of course, we are interested in those things. But we are also interested in the opinions of many other people. And just as importantly is there were millions of people who wanted their voice to be heard. And when technology gave them the ability to get their voice heard, they invested a lot of time and energy in doing that. And this is what we see is repeated when software comes in and really challenges an industry. It's about democratization. It's about empowering people to be heard, to become makers, to become creators. And sometimes you can't predict what they're going to do with that, but that's what they want. And the other flip side is, because this happens as well in media, it is us as consumers to democratize through mass customization, to get the information that I want, that is most interesting to me. And what that does, this process of democratization, it actually disintermediates existing vertical companies, like the New York Times, like the Washington Post, because people go around them. They find ways to get that out until they understand the opportunity, and then they embrace it. And so it's happening now in education. It's starting. We talk about Udacity, the Khan Academy, massively open online courses, and we're starting to see those types of democratizations and disintermediations enabled by software. It's happening in healthcare. Again, I see we've got a panel this afternoon on healthcare, where, again, personalized medicine through companies like 123andMe with your personal genomics, to the personal devices that we wear, those types of things. And we think what's next is the future of making things. And of course, there are real early signs of that out there. 3D printing is getting a lot of attention these days. And I think it deserves its attention. But I think it's for some reasons that are more than the obvious. And it's about how much, back to that, people have the latent desire to be creators. And people like 3D printing because I can be a creator. I can imagine it, draw it on my screen, ship that computer file to somebody, and they ship the part back in the overnight mail. Or maybe, have it at my home and do it. I personally don't think we're going to be making all of our consumer goods in our house, but some of us will be. But more importantly, it, again, represents that desire to make things. And we see it as robotics become much more easier to use in factories with things like Baxter Robot from Rethink Robotics, which is a $25,000 self-learning robot that doesn't need programming. That's going to change how assembly is done. And we see it with things like Arduino in electronics, which again allow non-experts, and this is really the thing again with 3D printing, to get a part made, you had to be an expert. Well, now you don't have to be an expert. You can simply get something made. And that latent desire for democratization of creators and that latent desire as consumers for customization is what this really represents. And the kinds of things you can do are going to change. 3D printing today, what you see is going to be much more, and it's much broader than 3D printing. One of the areas that we're focused on in that space is printed electronics. How do I do low volume, but very low cost electronics? How do I make a $15 sensor, 15-cent sensor, temperature sensor that I could stick on every package or every bottle of insulin to make sure that it's still safe? And we're working to develop those technologies, working with one of our commercialization partners, Thin Film, which is a Norwegian company, to bring that to market. But as I said, if you think about the opportunity of the latent demand, that human need again, that why 3D printing is going to have so much attention, it's about people wanting to create things and people wanting to consume things uniquely designed for them. But of course, if you have an idea that you want to make a product, it takes more than literally being able to make the part. You actually have to imagine the idea. You have to design it. It has to get funded. You have to decide how to source it. Then the components have to get made, and then of course it has to be shipped and fulfilled to the customer, and of course there's a closed loop process of post-sale support, et cetera. So if we're going to democratize making things, it's actually going to be about democratizing all steps of that process. And that's where we see a lot of the innovation opportunity. And again, what this interest in 3D printing is really the sign of this larger interest. So let me talk about what's happening in those areas, because the trends of democratization are there as well, and because as an innovator, I think there's great opportunities for people who can innovate in these spaces and enable that end-to-end democratization. So Kickstarter. Who in the room is familiar with Kickstarter? Maybe raise your hand. Okay, so maybe only 20%. Everybody else, go learn. Go to the website, really. And what Kickstarter is this is democratizing funding of a product. And there are many other things that are coming down the lines like this. And it does it in the past, if I was an innovator and I had an idea, I had two ways I could get it funding. I could go to a VC and try to convince them that not only is this a product that some people will buy, this is the basis for a company. And by the way, if you couldn't envision it being a billion-dollar company one day, then pretty much go away, because it's not a big enough opportunity to interest them. They can take a high risk, but the opportunity better be there. Or I could go to my boss at a company and convince them to invest in my idea. But again, if I work for a company that's a $23 billion a year company, if you're not talking about something that can be $1 billion in 5 years, it gets kind of uninteresting. But the problem is a lot of things start at that scale when you don't know what they could become. And the other problem is there's a lot of people out there who would be really happy with a $5 million a year business. It's not so bad if you have an idea that could actually generate that. And so Kickstarter is about a different funding model. It says you go to Kickstarter and it's a social website, and you say, here's my idea for a product. I will make that product if I can find enough people to buy it in advance. And it works. I have bought several products on Kickstarter. One of the first smartwatches, the Pebble smartwatch, that had great popularity. Other things, people say give me $100 now, and in a year I'll deliver you that product. And if 1,000 of you do it, I can get $100,000, and I then have enough money to make the product. And since its inception, which is a very short time, about 2 years, 5 million people have done that. They've pledged $700 million to fund 50,000 projects. So there is a latent demand out there for people to be creators and for people to get customized goods. And that will create this font, we believe, of new product innovation, because again, many things will get funded that couldn't get funded otherwise. And some of those will turn into those billion-dollar companies. This is the example, the Pebble smartwatch that I talked about. Really interesting, right? Smartwatches are a lot in the news today. They were looking for 10,000 people to give them $100, and they found 68,000 to give them $10 million. Very, very successful. Except, if you look at it, of those 48,500 projects, more than 75% didn't ship on time. So, you know, the rest of that value chain's hard. It's one thing to have the idea. It's another thing to convince some people to give you money. And it's yet another thing to actually be able to put together a complex value chain to create something like a smartwatch. And another thing to design it. And so all of those pieces of the value chain will get democratized. And again, there are technologies developing that. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And again, this is some areas where we're working. We see tools like Tinkercad, which are about democratizing CAD systems, allowing non-experts to design things. We see companies like Dragon, which is a really interesting company. That's value chains as a service. They have a set of experts. If you've got a great idea, like a Pebble smartwatch, you go to them and they'll help you find the right manufacturers in China, in Japan. You know, JETRO, if you're not talking to them, you probably should be, because that's their mission, is to assemble those value chains on demand for people. And there's a set of software that's going beyond CAD, traditional CAD, but to actually go into the conceptual design phase. SciDesign is a startup that recently got acquired here in Palo Alto that was a spin-out of PARC that took some of our technology in applying artificial intelligence to the early stages of the design process. And this shows some of the details. This is actually a significant research activity for us with the U.S. government, how to put together these value chains on demand, how to do much of the the product development design phases with automatic tools for synthesis and verification, how to ensure that your design is manufacturable at that design stage. So in summary, what we see this future of making things is it's really enabling a transition in the model from in-house skills and funding from VCs and in-house funding to generally vertically integrated production, or if you're not a vertically integrated company, you have a highly integrated static value chain and many of the same product. This world envisions thousands of new products, each of which can be different, networks of manufacturers who are put together on demand, intelligent design tools to help non-experts design things, and the ability to build teams, again, on demand of expertise, distributed expertise to bring together. You know, the analogy here that I make for people is a Hollywood movie. A significant production like the Titanic movie is a $200 million endeavor for 2 years. It's like somebody built a company, a $200 million company, $100 million a year company that comes together, works, and then disassembles. That works in that industry with, again, the right software tools to help people find each other, the right software tools for collaboration, the right software tools for design. You can actually do the same in product development. And people who innovate in those areas are going to be wildly successful, in our opinion, over the next decade. Well, thank you. Again, here's some information to follow up with us if you're interested, and I'm looking forward to this afternoon. I appreciate your time.
So now we would like to proceed to Q&A. And I would like to take a few questions from the audience. Please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to come. And please mention your name and your affiliation or activity before asking a question.
Hi, my name is Ken, and I'm from a company called Gengo. We're a startup that provides crowdsourced translation. In your most recent presentation, you talked a little bit about the democratization of, I guess, data and kind of privacy and useful data. And so one thing, I really love your story about Kickstarter in terms of the funding side of things, of the masses. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on as the internet population rises in the next 5 years or so, you know, access through the internet and production through the internet might change. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts around that from like an innovation perspective.
You know, as I tried to articulate in my talk, we think the democratization of the ability to make complex things is going to occur. And it's going to occur through companies like Dragon, who really, help people build that value chain. It's really a consulting service, but you're actually going to see software-mediated services. These are some of the technologies that we're working on, where you can imagine brokerages of people who have manufacturing capabilities and people who have products that they want manufactured, because not everything will be able to be printed on your 3D printer. So, but if you've got that great idea and you're not an expert at manufacturing, how will you find the company who can do that? And oftentimes for complex products, it's more than one company. So how do you assemble those? How do you assemble those on demand? Capabilities in simulation and modeling, big data analytics are going to enable those as a service, platforms as a service for literally making things. And so the cost of entry, much as we've seen kind of lean startups come from the lowering of the cost of entry to go to develop a software product, we believe you're going to see that same thing happen for many consumer-grade hardware products. This isn't how you're going to design your next nuclear power plant. It's not how you're going to design the Joint Strike Fighter. But, if I want a new phone case for my iPhone, or a chair, or a knife, a cutting knife and a cutting board, many of the things we buy, a rice cooker, an espresso machine, those can be done in that way, and we really see that transition occurring.
So is there anybody? So, please.
Hi, I'm John Sarter with Off the Grid Design. We design net positive energy structures. So I'm wondering, with something like Kickstarter, if you have an idea and you put it out there and crowdsource it, how do you protect your intellectual property from somebody else taking your idea and running with it?
Well, there's no difference really from selling your product. I mean, you're obviously, before you put it out there, you want to have your design. You wouldn't want to reveal the designs and any design information. You want to have copyrighted and as appropriate, or trade secret, or filed patents. I mean, it's a public disclosure. So for those in the business, you understand what a public disclosure means before you file a patent. So don't do that. File your patents. But I don't see it as the Kickstarter, because it's the funding is the problem. There are some problems around. There are websites where you really put your design out there for someone to use to make a 3D part, out of that, and there's more risk in those areas. But again, I see this as an innovation opportunity. That was the fact that the music industry didn't really figure out how to do that is what led to the torrents and all the downloading and illegal ripping of music. But DRM solutions exist, and then in fact we realize even Apple today strips away the DRM solution because the cost has gotten cheap enough for purchasing the good. So there are issues around putting your designs out there, but that's not really a Kickstarter problem. But I think it is an innovation opportunity for digital rights management and micropayments and all of those kinds of technologies.
Hi, I'm Tony Bucher. I'm with Fiat Lux Services, an executive recruiting firm for Asia Pacific. Now, it's interesting you talk about the democratization of all these processes, and it occurs to me that that's going to lead to profound changes in work and
yes.
organizations and economic organization. Can you address that, or do you kind of factor that into your research?
So it's an interesting topic, and I used my analogy to Hollywood, and I think it's a provocative one, right? Because many of those people, very skilled, directors, sound editors, they don't work for anybody, but they do have a union that makes sure they get paid well and provides benefits and insurance, for their payments, so I think you are going to see, where you can have entire, you may have $100 million product companies that have 100 employees, and they're using this distributed kind of on-demand team of networks of experts. And I think it can radically change employment contracts, and what that means. And I think it's also a call to action for our educators, because one of the things that you worry about is there's a set of people who will know how to participate in that economy and a set who don't. And as educators, we need to do it. And so, again, what I'm trying to do here to say is this is the trend this is the start of a trend. And trying to use the analogy to say this is what's going to happen. These are not all solved problems, but innovators solve those problems and make money and change the world. This is the space for innovation, and they're going to occur, and I think they're going to be significant social changes that, that potentially come about as a result of this.
Okay, so we are almost running out of time, so I'd like to one more question, last question. So who's the first? Maybe here. So, and please ask speakers maybe at the reception. So Dr. Hoover will be remaining at the reception?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the last question, please.
Good afternoon. I'm David Cowan. I'm a global market development specialist, so I put together the networks of sales, marketing, business development professionals to take products to market. My question, can you talk a little bit about PARC and your work in terms of working with your customers to develop the new business models, not just the technology that's going into them, but the new business models themselves?
Yeah. That's one of the most challenging parts, particularly for large organizations who, for really good reasons, right? The existing business model works, and oftentimes you have to cannibalize yourself. I look at, Apple and the iPhone. What did that do to the iPod? Kind of killed it. But if someone was going to kill the iPod, wouldn't you rather have it be Apple? So we have a process that we call opportunity discovery that we try to work with companies who want to look at that kind of disruptive opportunity. And it's about really integrating people from strategy and technology and new business creation. If I laud some companies, some big companies actually have a set of people, that's their job. It's very interesting. We work with Procter & Gamble. They have a new business creation function. And that's really, there's a set of people, and they're good people who are pulled from really good spots in the company. So there are a set of ways to think about that opportunity. The biggest challenge is just engaging in it and not being afraid of self-cannibalization. If you can get over those things, then we find you can get people to think differently about business models. The other is to think about how do you experiment, with those, encouraging companies to find a niche, a corner to experiment. Because again, agile learning is the key. Your first view might not be right. And we look at many, what was Facebook's business model when it started? It wasn't clear, but it sure is clear now. And so you've got to take some agile exploration through that process.